the. Have you ever felt like the more you chase, the more they pull away? Like you're giving love but getting distance in return? Here's the truth most people don't understand. Avoidant people don't respond to pressure. They respond to emotional safety and calm boundaries. And the words you use can completely change how they see you, not by controlling them, but by shifting your energy from chasing to grounded self-respect. Because the moment they feel they can't disrespect your peace, they start respecting you. When you are dealing with someone who has an avoidant attachment style, one of the biggest mistakes you can make is trying to chase them when they pull away. Because what you think is love and effort, they often experience pressure and emotional intensity that feels overwhelming. And the more overwhelmed they feel, the more they retreat. It creates a cycle where you pursue harder and they distance further. This is why the first and most powerful shift you must make is to stop chasing and start grounding yourself. Grounding means coming back to your emotional center. It means you stop letting their behavior control your inner peace. Instead of reacting instantly to their silence, their distance, or their mixed signals, you pause, you breathe, you remind yourself that your worth is not being decided in real time by how fast they reply or how close they are acting today. This is where most people lose their power. They start measuring their value through someone else's availability. And that is exactly what creates imbalance in the relationship dynamic. Avoidant individuals are highly sensitive to emotional pressure. Even when it is not spoken directly, they can feel it in repeated messages, in constant checking, in over-explaining feelings, in needing reassurance again and again. To them, this energy can feel like they are being pulled into something they are not ready to handle. So instead of moving closer, they instinctively step back to regain control of their emotional space. It is not always because they don't care. It is because closeness without emotional regulation feels unsafe to them. Now here is where grounding changes everything. When you stop chasing, you stop feeding that pressure system. You become emotionally stable in your own space. You respond instead of react. You communicate instead of plead. You show presence without desperation. And this shift is deeply noticeable to someone with an avoidant pattern because what they are used to is emotional escalation. What they are not used to is calm consistency. Grounding does not mean you become cold or unavailable. It means you become emotionally self-contained. You can still care, you can still love, but you are no longer abandoning yourself in the process. You are not waiting anxiously for their next message to feel okay. You are not rearranging your entire emotional state based on their attention. You continue living your life, maintaining your routines, your goals, your self-respect, even when they are distant. This is where respect begins to grow. Not because you are trying to earn it, but because you are no longer violating your own emotional boundaries to get closeness. When someone sees that you are not chasing them into emotional chaos, something shifts inside them. They start to recognize that you are not dependent on their inconsistency. You are not collapsing when they pull away. You are steady, and steadiness is rare in emotionally avoidant dynamics. Most people respond with anxiety, urgency, or emotional intensity. But when you do the opposite, when you remain grounded, you interrupt the pattern. You stop being predictable in the way they expect. Instead of you chasing and then withdrawing, you become calm and centered. That creates a completely different psychological experience for them. It also protects you because chasing drains your emotional energy. It creates overthinking, self-doubt, and emotional exhaustion. You start analyzing every message, every delay, every small change in tone, and slowly you lose yourself in the process of trying to keep someone close who is not meeting you halfway. Grounding brings you back to yourself. It reminds you that your emotional stability is not negotiable. There is also a quiet power in not reacting immediately. When you don't rush to fix distance, you communicate strength. When you don't panic over silence, you communicate self-trust. And when you trust yourself, you stop making decisions from fear. You start making decisions from clarity. That is the difference between being emotionally available and being emotionally dependent. Over time, this shift changes the entire dynamic. Either the avoidant person learns to approach you with more respect and consistency, or you naturally detach from something that was never balanced to begin with. In both cases, you win because you are no longer stuck in a cycle of chasing something that keeps moving away. You are standing in your own emotional ground. And from that place, you either build real connection or you walk away with your dignity intact. And that is the real message behind stopping the chase. It is not about playing games. It is about refusing to lose yourself in pursuit of someone else's readiness. Tests when you are dealing with someone who has an avoidant attachment style. Unclear emotional signals will always create confusion, distance, and emotional imbalance. One of the most powerful things you can do in that dynamic is to communicate boundaries that are simple, calm, and direct. Not emotional explosions, not long explanations, not repeated arguments, but clear statements that define how you expect to be treated and what you will do if that standard is not met. Most people fail here because they confuse boundaries with control or punishment. So they either stay silent to avoid scaring the person away, or they express boundaries in anger when they are already hurt. Both approaches create problems. Silence make, as you invisible and emotional outbursts make the avoidant person feel overwhelmed or pressured. What actually builds respect is emotional clarity without emotional chaos. A clear boundary is not about forcing someone to behave a certain way. It is about defining your limit and then respecting it yourself. For example, instead of repeatedly asking, "Why are you ignoring me?" or sending multiple messages when someone withdraws, a grounded boundary sounds like, "I understand you need space, but I also need consistent communication. If that is not possible, I will take a step back." This is calm. It is not threatening. It is not begging. It simply states reality. Avoidant individuals often respond to pressure by pulling away even more. But when they encounter calm certainty, something shifts. They are used to emotional unpredictability. People who chase, over-explain, get upset, then apologize, then chase again. That cycle gives them emotional control without them consciously trying to control anything. But when you introduce boundaries, you remove confusion from the system. You are no longer reacting emotionally to their inconsistency. You are defining what is acceptable for you. This is where respect begins to form. Not because you are demanding it, but because you are no longer available for situations that drain you. A boundary is not a negotiation. It is a statement of self-respect. And when someone realizes that your presence is not unconditional in terms of emotional neglect, they start to see you differently. You are no longer just someone who tolerates everything. You are someone who observes, evaluates, and responds with self-worth. One important aspect of setting boundaries is tone. Tone carries more weight than words. You can say the right thing in the wrong emotional energy, and it will still feel like pressure or resentment. But when you say it calmly without accusation or emotional overload, it lands differently. For example, "I need consistency in communication" is very different from "you never care about me" and "you always ignore me." One invites respect, the other invites withdrawal. Another key part is follow through. Boundaries without action are just words. If you say you will step back when communication is inconsistent, but you continue chasing anyway, the message you send is that your boundary is flexible under emotional pressure. Avoidant individuals quickly learn patterns. They don't just listen to what you say, they observe what you tolerate. If your actions do not match your boundaries, your words lose meaning. This is why calm consistency is more powerful than emotional intensity. You don't need to repeat your boundary 10 times. You don't need to convince someone to understand it. You state it once clearly and then you act in alignment with it. If the behavior continues, you do not escalate emotionally. You simply adjust your access. That might mean replying less, stepping back, or redirecting your energy elsewhere. Setting boundaries also protects your emotional health. Without them, you enter a cycle where you constantly adapt to someone else's availability. You start shrinking your needs to avoid conflict. You accept less communication, less clarity, less emotional presence just to keep the connection alive. Over time, that creates resentment and anxiety. Boundaries stop that erosion. They remind you that your needs are valid even when the other person is not ready to meet them. There is also a deeper psychological shift that happens when you consistently hold boundaries. You stop approaching relationships from a place of fear of losing them, fear of being too much, fear of pushing them away. Instead, you start operating from a place of choice. You are not forcing connection. You are allowing it only if it meets a certain emotional standard that changes your energy completely. And that energy is often what the other person responds to more than the words themselves. In avoidant dynamics, people often think that being more understanding means accepting less. But real understanding does not mean abandoning yourself. You can understand someone's need for space while also honoring your need for consistency. You can care about someone's emotional style without letting it override your emotional needs. That balance is what creates healthy interaction. Ultimately, clear and calm boundaries shift the entire relationship structure. They remove guessing, they remove emotional games, they remove silent resentment, and they replace all of that with clarity, structure, and self-respect. Some people will rise to meet that standard, others will not, but either way, you no longer lose yourself trying to be chosen by someone who cannot meet you halfway. When you are dealing with someone who has an avoidant attachment style, one of the most important emotional shifts you can make is learning not to over-explain your feelings, because what usually happens in these dynamics is that one person feels deeply, anxiously, and intensely while the other person processes emotions by stepping back, disconnecting, or shutting down. So when you try to explain everything in detail, how you feel, why you feel it, what triggered it, what they did wrong, and what you need from them, it can quickly become emotionally overwhelming for them and emotionally exhausting for you. Over-explaining usually comes from a place of fear, not clarity. It is the fear of not being understood, the fear of being misunderstood, or the fear of losing the connection if everything is not fully clarified. So you try to fill every gap with words, thinking that if you just explain it well enough, the other person will finally get it and respond the way you hope. But in avoidant dynamics, more words often create more distance, not more closeness. Avoidant individuals tend to process emotional intensity differently. Tests. When emotions are presented in a very detailed, layered, or repeated way, emotions are presented in a very detailed, layered, or repeated way, they can feel pressured to respond immediately or correctly, even when they are not emotionally ready. Instead of engaging more deeply, their system often does the opposite. It withdraws to regulate the intensity. So while you are trying to create connection through explanation, they are trying to create safety through distance. This is why simplicity becomes powerful. Saying less does not mean caring less. It means communicating in a way that is easier to receive. Instead of long emotional speeches, repeated arguments, or trying to make them understand every detail of your inner world, you learn to express yourself in clear, grounded statements. For example, instead of explaining for 10 minutes how ignored you felt, you might say, "When communication drops suddenly, I feel disconnected and I need consistency." That single sentence carries more impact than a long emotional breakdown. Over-explaining also weakens your emotional position. When you feel the need to justify your feelings extensively, it can unintentionally signal that your emotions require approval or validation before they are legitimate. But your feelings do not need permission and to exist. They are valid even in their simplest form. You do not need to build a case like you are proving something in court. You are not trying to win an argument. You are communicating your internal reality. Another important aspect is that over-explaining often leads to loss of emotional control. The more you talk, the more you risk being pulled into emotional loops, repeating yourself, defending yourself, correcting misunderstandings, or trying to make the other person feel what you feel. This can quickly turn into emotional exhaustion. And in that state, you are no longer communicating from strength. You are communicating from urgency. Avoidant individuals, on the other hand, often respond better to emotional space and clarity rather than emotional intensity and repetition. When you speak simply and then stop, you give them room to process without feeling overwhelmed. Silence after clarity is powerful. It allows your words to settle, instead of being buried under more emotional layers. There is also a deeper form of respect involved in not over-explaining. It is respect for yourself and respect for the other person's ability to understand you without being emotionally carried through rough every detail. It communicates that you trust your words to stand on their own. You are not trying to convince, you are expressing. This shift also changes how you feel internally. When you stop over-explaining, you reduce anxiety. You stop replaying conversations in your head, wondering if you said too much or not enough. You stop trying to fix every misunderstanding immediately. You start allowing space for things to breathe. And in that space, you regain emotional control. It is also important to understand that understanding does not always come from more explanation. Sometimes understanding comes from time, observation, and emotional experience. People often think clarity must be instant, but in reality, emotional processing is often slower than verbal communication. When you say something clearly once and then allow space, the other person has room to process it on their own terms. Over-explaining can also create imbalance in effort. If one person is constantly explaining, clarifying, and emotionally managing the situation, then they are the ones who are in control. While the other is simply receiving or withdrawing. The relationship becomes uneven. One person becomes emotional, overactive, and the other becomes emotionally passive. That imbalance is not sustainable when you learn to speak less but mean more. Your communication gains weight. Your words become more noticeable because they are not buried under repetition. There is a quiet confidence in saying what you feel once and not chasing validation for it. It shows emotional maturity and self-trust. Ultimately, the goal is not to become emotionally distant or silent. The goal is to become intentional. You express your feelings clearly without drowning them in explanation. You say what matters and then you allow space for response. You do not try to force understanding, you allow it to develop naturally. And in avoidant dynamics, this is often where real change begins. Because when emotional intensity is replaced with calm clarity, and when over-explanation is replaced with grounded communication, the entire energy of the interaction shifts. You stop trying to pull someone closer with words and instead, you start standing firmly in your own emotional truth. Giving space without punishment is one of the most misunderstood emotional skills in relationships, especially when you are dealing with someone who has an avoidant attachment style. Most people here give space and either panic and disappear completely, or they stay distant but emotionally punish the other person through silence, coldness, or passive-aggressive behavior. Neither of these is healthy. One is abandonment driven by fear, and the other is distance driven by resentment. What actually creates emotional respect is something much more stable, calm space without emotional games. Avoidant individuals naturally need space to regulate their emotions. When they feel overwhelmed, pressured, or emotionally crowded, their instinct is to step back and reconnect with themselves. This is not always about rejecting the other person, it is often about self-regulation. The problem begins when the other person interprets this space as rejection and reacts emotionally. They might chase, over-message, demand reassurance, or try to force closeness. This creates pressure, and pressure makes avoidant behavior stronger. So the more you chase, the more they withdraw. It becomes a cycle of emotional imbalance. But when you give space without punishment, you break that cycle. You allow distance without turning it into emotional warfare. You do not appear to make them suffer. You do not ignore them to get revenge. You do not withhold attention to teach a lesson. Instead, you simply step back with emotional stability. You remain calm, composed, and grounded in your own life without making their distance the center of your emotional world. This is where emotional maturity becomes visible. Giving space without punishment means you do not attach emotional drama to the distance. You do not send messages like "fine, ignore me then," or "I guess you don't care." You also do not flood them with messages trying to pull them back. You step back and allow the situation to breathe. You give them the freedom to process while also protecting your own emotional balance. What makes this powerful is the energy behind it. Avoidant individuals are very sensitive to emotional pressure, even when it is unspoken. They can sense urgency, anxiety, and emotional dependence. When space is given with frustration or hidden resentment, they feel it. It does not feel like healthy distance that feels like emotional tension. But when space is given calmly without punishment, it feels different. It feels safe. It feels non-controlling. It feels like respect. And respect is the foundation of change in avoidant dynamics. When someone feels that you are not trying to control their emotional movement, they begin to lower their guard. They realize that you are not chasing them into discomfort, but you are also not abandoning yourself. You are holding your position without force. Giving space without punishment also means you are not using silence as a weapon. Silence used as punishment is still emotional reactivity. It is saying, I am going to ignore you so you feel what I feel. That energy keeps you emotionally attached to their behavior. You are still reacting to them even if you are not communicating. But calm space is different. Calm space is not about them. It is about you maintaining your emotional stability while allowing natural distance to exist. This approach also protects your self-respect. When you give space without punishment, you are not lowering your emotional standards just to keep someone close. You are not chasing, but you are also not collapsing. You are saying through your behavior, I can handle distance without losing myself. That is a powerful emotional message. Even if it is never spoken over time, this creates a shift in how you are perceived. Instead of being seen as someone who reacts impulsively to distance, you are seen as someone who remains steady. And steady energy is rare in emotionally avoidant dynamics. Most people either chase or shut down emotionally. Very few people remain calm and consistent while still caring. That consistency builds quiet respect. It is also important to understand that giving space does not mean you ignore your own needs. You are not pretending everything is fine when it is not. You are simply choosing not to react from emotional instability. If the pattern continues, you still have boundaries. You still make decisions, but you do it from clarity, not emotional chaos. There is a subtle strength in not turning every moment of distance into a crisis. When you stop punishing space, you stop turning relationships into emotional battles. You allow reality to reveal itself naturally. If the connection is healthy, space will not destroy it. It will actually help it breathe. If the connection is not healthy, space will make that clear too, without you needing to force anything. Most importantly, giving space without punishment brings you back to yourself. You stop obsessing over what the other person is doing in their silence. You stop interpreting every delay as rejection. You stop emotionally spiraling every time there is distance. Instead, you focus on your own life, your own emotional state, and your own stability. And from that place, something very important happens. You are no longer emotionally controlled by the presence or absence of someone else. You are not chasing connection out of fear, and you are not withdrawing out of anger. You are simply living in emotional balance. That is the real power of this principle. Not to manipulate someone's behavior, but to protect your own emotional integrity while allowing space to exist without fear, punishment, or collapse. When you start saying, I'm open to love, but not confusion, or any similar statement that reflects your self-worth, something very important shifts in how people perceive you and how you perceive yourself. Valuing yourself out loud is not about arrogance or superiority. It is about removing silence around your standards. It is about no longer hiding what you need in order to feel emotionally safe, respected, and balanced in a relationship. Most people struggle with this because they can fuse self-worth with ego, so they either stay silent about their needs to appear easygoing, or they express their needs in frustration only after they have already been hurt. Both patterns weaken emotional clarity. When you are dealing with someone who has an avoidant attachment style, this becomes even more important. Avoidant dynamics often involve emotional ambiguity, inconsistency, and distance. In such situations, people with lower self-worth tend to adapt too much. They begin to accept confusion as normal. They start telling themselves that this is just how love is, or maybe I'm expecting too much, or I should just be patient. Slowly, their emotional needs get pushed to the background and the relationship becomes centered around managing uncertainty instead of building connection. Valuing yourself out loud interrupts that pattern. When you clearly express what you will and will not accept, you are not trying to control the other person. You are defining your emotional environment. You are saying without aggression but with certainty that your emotional well-being has structure. For example, when you say something like, "I want consistency, not mixed signals," you are not attacking anyone, you are simply naming your standard. And naming your standard is one of the most powerful forms of emotional clarity. Many people underestimate how much unspoken tolerance shapes relationships. When you do not express your standards, others often assume your silence means acceptance. Over time, that creates imbalance. You might feel emotionally drained, confused, or undervalued, while the other person continues behaving in a way that is comfortable for them, but not necessarily aligned with your needs. This is not always intentional on their part. It is often a natural outcome of unclear emotional communication. When you start valuing yourself out loud, you change that dynamic. You make your emotional boundaries visible. You make your expectations clear without aggression, and you stop relying on indirect signals or emotional reactions to communicate your limits. Instead of waiting until you are overwhelmed to express frustration, you establish your emotional identity early and calmly. This also changes how you carry yourself in interactions. There is a difference between someone who quietly hopes they are treated well and someone who knows they deserve to be treated well. The first energy often leads to overthinking, anxiety, and emotional dependence on outcomes. The second energy leads to stability, clarity, and self-respect. When you value yourself out loud, you begin to embody that second energy. In avoidant dynamics specifically, this becomes even more noticeable. Avoidant individuals are often drawn to emotional independence, but they also tend to test boundaries indirectly. When they encounter someone who does not clearly express their standards, they will ask them to clarify or provide more information. It can create a pattern where distance, inconsistency, or emotional ambiguity goes unchallenged, not because the other person does not care, but because nothing clearly signals that the behavior is affecting the connection. When you clearly state your emotional standards, you introduce structure into that dynamic. You are no longer participating in confusion as if it is normal. You are redefining what you are available for. And when this is done calmly and consistently, it does not create pressure. It creates clarity. And clarity is something even avoidant individuals subconsciously respect, even if they do not immediately respond to it. Valuing yourself out loud also protects you from self-abandonment. One of the biggest emotional risks in difficult relationship dynamics is slowly disconnecting from your own needs just to maintain proximity with someone else. You start adjusting your expectations, minimizing your feelings, and ignoring discomfort just to keep the connection alive. But over time, that leads to resentment not just toward the other person, but toward yourself for tolerating what you never actually wanted. When you speak your value out loud, you prevent that internal conflict from building. You remind yourself repeatedly that your emotional needs are valid. You are not asking for too much by wanting consistency, clarity, respect, or emotional presence. You are simply acknowledging what allows you to feel secure in a connection. There is also a quiet confidence that comes with this practice. You stop seeking constant reassurance from the other person because your standards are already clear to yourself. You are not trying to convince them to treat you well. You are observing whether they naturally meet what you have already defined. This shifts your emotional position from uncertainty to observation. And observation is powerful. Instead of being emotionally pulled into every small change in behavior, you start seeing patterns. You start noticing consistency or lack of it without emotional distortion. You are no longer interpreting everything through fear or hope. You are simply seeing what is there. Over time, this creates a natural filtering effect in your life. People who align with your emotional standards stay, and those who do not naturally fall away. Not because you push them away, but because you stopped adjusting yourself to fit emotional inconsistency. You stopped shrinking your needs to maintain connection. You stopped staying silent about what matters to you. Ultimately, valuing yourself out loud is not about changing someone else's behavior. It is about refusing to disappear inside a relationship. It is about keeping your emotional identity intact even when the connection is uncertain and in avoidant dynamics where confusion and distance can easily become the norm. This clarity becomes your anchor, one of the most emotionally grounding shifts you can make in any relationship, especially with someone who has an avoidant attachment style, is learning to let consistency decide. Everything instead of words, promises, or emotional moments. Because in the beginning, words can feel powerful. Someone can say they miss you, they care about you, they think about you, they want you in their life. And in those moments, it feels real, it feels reassuring. But over time, if those words are not matched by consistent behavior, they start to lose meaning. And this is where many people get stuck. They keep holding on to what is said instead of observing what is actually done. Consistency is the only real language of emotional truth. It is not about a single good day, a deep conversation, or a moment of closeness after distance. It is about patterns over time. It is about how someone shows up repeatedly when things are normal, not just when emotions are high. Avoidant individuals in particular can be very expressive in certain moments and then emotionally distant in others. This creates a confusing contrast where the emotional highs feel very meaningful, but the emotional lows feel very empty. And if you are not careful, you start chasing those highs and ignoring the inconsistency in between. Letting consistency decide means you stop making decisions based on emotional spikes. You stop saying, "But they were so caring last night," or "They said they really want this." While ignoring the fact that days or weeks of distance follow those moments, you begin to ask a different question. What is the pattern here? Not what they said once, but what they consistently do when there is no emotional intensity, no pressure, no crisis. This shift protects you from emotional illusion because inconsistency is powerful. It creates hope. It gives you just enough connection to stay emotionally invested and just enough distance to keep you confused. That confusion often makes people try harder. They think if they just communicate better, love more, or wait a little longer, the consistent version of the person will finally appear. But in reality, consistency is not something you can force out of someone. It either exists in their behavior or it doesn't. When you let consistency decide, you remove yourself from that cycle. You stop overanalyzing individual moments and start observing the overall direction of the connection. Are things becoming more stable over time, or are they repeatedly going in cycles of closeness and withdrawal? Are you feeling more secure as time passes? Is or more uncertain? These are the real indicators of emotional health in a connection, not isolated conversations or temporary reassurance. This approach is especially important with avoidant dynamics because inconsistency is often part of the pattern. Avoidant individuals may feel genuine connection, but their comfort with closeness fluctuates. So, they may engage deeply at times and then retreat when emotional intensity increases. If you judge the relationship based only on the moments of closeness, you will always feel hope. But if you judge it based on consistency, you start seeing reality more clearly. Letting consistency decide also helps you detach from emotional dependency. When you are focused on words, you are constantly waiting for reassurance. You are waiting for the next message, the next sign of care, the next emotional moment to feel secure again. But when you shift to consistency, your attention moves away from chasing reassurance and toward observing behavior over time. You are no longer emotionally reacting to each interaction. You are evaluating the overall pattern. This creates emotional stability inside you. Instead of feeling high when they are close and when they are distant, you begin to flatten the emotional extremes. You are not as easily pulled into excitement or anxiety based on short-term behavior. You become more steady because your judgment is not based on fluctuation is based on patterns. It also protects your self-respect. When you ignore inconsistency, you often end up adjusting your own behavior to maintain connection. You tolerate confusion. You reduce your expectations. You excuse emotional absence. And you start normalizing what actually feels unstable. But when you let consistency decide, you no longer have to justify emotional discomfort. If the pattern is not aligning with your needs, you see it clearly without needing to overthink or over-explain it to yourself. There is also a quiet strength in this mindset. You are no longer emotionally negotiating with reality. You are not trying to interpret mixed signals in a way that feels comforting. You are simply observing what is consistently present. And from that observation, your decisions become clearer. You either continue investing where there is real consistency, or you step back where there is repeated emotional uncertainty over time. This changes how you experience relationships completely. You stop being overly attached to potential and start being grounded in reality. You stop saying they could become consistent and start asking, are they consistent now? You stop building emotional security on moments and start building it on patterns. And this is where real emotional freedom begins. Because when consistency becomes your standard, you are no longer easily trapped in cycles of hope and disappointment. You are no longer chasing emotional clarity from someone who is not consistently offering it. Instead, you are anchored in observation, patience, and self-respect. In avoidant dynamics especially, this approach brings clarity where confusion usually exists. It removes fantasy from the equation and replaces it with reality. And even if the truth is not what you hoped for, it is always what sets you free from emotional uncertainty.